All right, in this video, we're going to be looking at your factoring quiz from lessons 7.7 and 7.8 to finish up this chapter on polynomials. So just like normal, remember that the order that my questions are in are going to be different from the order that your questions were in because they're all randomized. Let's look at this first one. So we're just factoring 8x squared minus 18. Now it's really important that you remember that anytime we go to factor, your first step is to always look for a greatest common factor. This one has a greatest common factor of just a 2. 2 goes into both 8 and 18. It's the largest number that goes into both of those. So when we do that, we're left with 4x squared minus 9. Now if you left it like that, you lost points. You want to make sure you always factor completely. So before we ever say we're done, we need to look at this and see, is there anything more I can do to it? And here I see that I have two terms, and I notice I can take the square root of both of them. So this is a difference of two squares. So the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of x squared would just be x, so we'd get 2x there. And the square root of 9 is 3, so we'd have 2x plus 3, 2x minus 3. That's how you factor a difference of two squares. So that would be your answer. You don't want to forget about the greatest common factor either there that you factor out at the beginning. So you'd have 2 times 2x plus 3 times 2x minus 3. And if you switch the order around, if you had 2x minus 3 times 2x plus 3, that would be fine. You just want to make sure that you also still remember that greatest common factor to include that as part of your answer there. All right, let's look at this one. So now this one, we also only have two terms, but there's no number that goes into both 49 and 36 evenly. There's no GCF. But what I do notice is I could take the square root of 49 and get 7, and the square root of 36 is 6. So this is a difference of two squares, so I'll just type this in. No need to write it down. So we would have a 7x plus 6 and 7x minus 6 would be your answer. Or if you switch it around and add 7x minus 6 times 7x plus 6, that would also have been correct. All right, this one we also have two terms, but it's a cubed. Okay, this is not a difference of squares. This is a cubic. Still look to see if we have a greatest common factor. I noticed that 125, the only thing that's going to go into 125 evenly would be like 5 or 3. But 3 doesn't go into 64, and 5 doesn't go into 64 either. And 3 doesn't even go into 125, by the way. But anyhow, so there's no greatest common factor here. So this is a difference of cubes. Remember with the difference of cubes, we have, I'm just going to write down the format here. So we'd have a cubed minus b cubed would factor down to be a minus b. Remember we have that SOAP acronym because inside of here we would have this same format where we'd have a squared, ab, and b squared. Then we have that SOAP acronym. So we have the same sign, and then we have the opposite sign, so this would be plus, and then we have always positive, so this would be plus as well. So that's going to help us out here. We just got to figure out, well, what's our value for a, what's our value for b. So the cube root of 64, what times itself 4 times is 64? Well, that would just be 4. So 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. And then what times itself 3 times would be 125? Well, that would be 5. So our value for a is 4x. Our value for b is 5. So we would have 4x minus 5. And then we would square the 4x. Not just the 4, not just the x. We'd square the 4x and get 16x squared. Then it'll be plus. Then we multiply our values for a and b. So we take 4x times 5, and that would be 20x. And then it'll be plus, square value for b, 5 squared is 25. So that would be your answer. So the way that you're going to type this in, that's really important. We're going to type this in as 4x minus 5. And then we're going to have 16. So to do the x squared, we're going to use that caret button. So we 16x, then that caret button is what we call that, 16x squared plus 20x plus 25. All right, so this is one of them from the very last section where we have 4 terms. So we're going to group those together. So we would have 4x cubed minus 4x squared. We're going to group the first two together. Then I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap there. And then we'll have minus 25x plus 25. All right, so in these first two, I noticed that we could factor out a 4x. When I do that, I'm left with x squared minus 1. I'm sorry, 4x squared is what I'm going to factor out, so I'm left with just an x minus 1. My bad. All right, so in the second set, I see that the first term is negative. Remember, that's the only trick there. We want to include a negative there. But I also see that they both are divisible by 25, so we factor out a 25. And that leaves me with x minus 1. Remember, if you distribute the negative 25 through, you should be able to get what you had in the previous step. Negative 25 times x is negative 25x, and negative 25 times a negative 1 is a positive 25. If you had a plus 1 there, and if I took negative 25 times 1, well, that would be negative 25, not a positive. Another way to look at it is 25 divided by 25 is negative 1. All right, so now what I notice is that we have an x minus 1 and an x minus 1. So I'm going to factor out an x minus 1. So that leaves me with 4x squared minus 25. Now, if you stop there, you lost points because 4x squared minus 25, that's a difference of squares. That can be factored down further. So the x minus 1 stays in x minus 1, but this would be 2x plus 5 and 2x minus 5. It does not matter what order you had these in, but that would be your answer. All right. So let's look at this one here. So this one is just one that, again, there's no greatest common factors. We have 5x squared plus 19x plus 12. So this is where we're going to have to use that x box method, or at least the box. Okay, if you don't want to use the x, you don't have to. But at least use the box. And so the box, you put the 5x squared here and the 12 down here. Now our goal is to figure out what goes in these two boxes. So to figure that out, that's where we're going to multiply together the 5x squared and the 12. So we would have 60x squared. And then we have the 19x. So I'm trying to find two numbers that multiply together to be 60, that add together to be 19. So if you had problems with this, I understand that, but after a while, maybe you ended up getting 4x times 15x, because 4x times 15x is 60x squared, and 4x plus 15x is 19x. We're going to use 4x and 15x there. Now we're just going to look to see, well, what's the greatest common factor for each row and column? In this row, the greatest common factor would be 5x. In this row down here, the greatest common factor would just be 4. In that first column, the greatest common factor would be x. In the last column, the greatest common factor would be 3. Now double check and make sure the outside factors multiply together to be inside. 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x times 3 is 15x. 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times 3 is 12. So you can be pretty confident that we have the right answer. So our answer would be x plus 3 times 5x plus 4. Now you could double check if you wanted to and multiply those together to make sure that you get 5x squared plus 19x plus 12. But actually we just did that by checking our work here. But that would be your answer. It does not matter what order we put those in. We get x plus 3 times 5x plus 4, or 5x plus 4 times x plus 3. Lastly, this one is one where you do not have to use that box method. We can just jump right in to just trying to figure out what two numbers multiply together to be 14 that add together to be negative 9. This trick only works this way because our leading coefficient here is 1. If there's no number there, then we can use this trick. And so what two numbers multiply together to be a positive 14 that add together to be a negative 9? Well, two numbers that multiply together to be a positive that add together to be a negative mean they're both negative numbers. And the only factors of 14 are 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. And hopefully you recognize quickly that 2 and 7 would be your answer. So x minus 2 times x minus 7, or if you switch those around, again, the order never matters there. If you switch those around, it would be the same thing. Oops. So x minus 7. So there you have it. So hopefully that makes sense now as far as maybe the ones that you might have gotten wrong. And again, we have a test coming up quickly here. So if you do have any questions on this quiz or any of the other quizzes, please make sure you get those questions answered so you know what to do when you go to take that test.